I didn't think much of it when Daniel, my boss, invited me over for dinner. I figured it was one of those professional but friendly things successful people did. A little team building outside the office. Maybe he liked my work ethic. Maybe he was just being nice. But I didn't expect what actually happened that night. Let me back up. I'd been at the company for a little over 7 months. Fresh out of college, still adjusting to full-time hours, and trying not to screw up. The job was solid. A mid-sized creative agency in Chicago. The kind of place with exposed brick walls, overpriced espresso, and people who said things like, "We're a family here," in meetings. Daniel was the creative director. Mid-30s, tall, effortlessly stylish in that wakes up looking like a magazine ad kind of way. He had this calm energy, never raised his voice, never looked stressed, always smelled expensive. People talked about him a lot, whispered things really. No one knew if he was dating anyone. He never talked about his personal life. But that didn't stop the rumors. Some said he was divorced. Some said he was secretly married. Others swore he was gay, but too professional to admit it. I never fed into it. I was too busy keeping my head down, submitting pitch decks, and pulling late nights trying to impress someone who rarely showed emotion. But to be honest, I'd be lying if I said I didn't notice the way he looked at me sometimes. Like he was curious. Anyway, it was a Thursday when it happened. We had just wrapped a big client pitch, one I had spent way too many nights obsessing over. Daniel nodded at me as we left the conference room, that subtle kind of nod that said, "Not bad." And then, later that afternoon, I got an email from him. Subject, dinner, body. "You've been working hard. Come by my place tonight. Nothing fancy, just food and a chance to talk without fluorescent lights overhead. You free?" I must have stared at the screen for 5 full minutes before replying. "Sure. What time?" He lived in a high-rise on the north side, of course. One of those places with a 24-hour doorman and floor-to-ceiling windows that probably made sunsets look like movie scenes. When I arrived, he buzzed me up, and the elevator opened straight into his apartment, and that's when I started to feel off. Because the lights were dim, and music was playing. Soft, jazzy, nothing too dramatic, but definitely not what I expected from a casual dinner with my boss. Daniel appeared around the corner, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, holding a glass of wine. "Glad you made it," he said, handing me a glass. "I kept it low-key. Hope that's okay." I took the glass, trying to play it cool. Low-key works. The place was gorgeous. Open layout, soft lighting, art on the walls that looked too abstract to be cheap. The kitchen smelled like garlic and roasted tomatoes. We talked while he finished cooking. Nothing deep, mostly work stuff at first. He asked what I thought of the team, how I was adjusting, what I wanted long-term. I answered like I was still in the office, measured, polite. But after a couple glasses of wine, things shifted. "So," he said, pouring us both more, "is this job what you thought it would be?" I shrugged. "I think so. I mean, it's a lot, but I like the pressure. You're good under it," he said, meeting my eyes. There was a pause, not awkward, just still. "I wasn't sure about you at first," he added, "but you've surprised me." I looked at him, unsure if it was a compliment or a warning. "Surprised you how?" He tilted his head, studying me. "You're more confident than you let on. You keep things close. But I see it." There was something in the way he said that. Low, deliberate, almost challenging. Like he was saying more than what was on the surface. Dinner was delicious. Roasted chicken, charred broccolini, couscous with lemon zest. The kind of meal that looked effortless but definitely took skill. Afterward, he invited me to the couch. I went, still unsure what to make of this whole night. We sat close. Not too close, but closer than 2 coworkers probably should. "I know this might seem weird," Daniel said eventually, swirling his wine, "inviting you here like this." I gave a small laugh. "I was wondering." He looked at me. "I wanted to see you outside the office, without the filter." I stared at my wine, unsure how to respond. Then he leaned in a little. You ever think about what it would be like, he said slowly, if we weren't coworkers? My heart stuttered. I turned to him. What do you mean? He didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he reached out and brushed his fingers against mine. Just for a second. Barely there. But it sent a jolt through me. I'm not going to pretend this is professional, he said. It's not. He was still watching me. Calm. Controlled. Waiting. And I sat there, pulse hammering in my throat, wondering if this night had always been leading here, or if I had just never let myself believe it could. I didn't move at first. His fingers had barely touched mine. So brief, so gentle, but it was enough to short-circuit my brain. I could still feel the warmth of it, like an afterimage. I glanced at our hands, then back up at him. He was calm, still, too still. His expression gave nothing away, just that unreadable calm confidence he wore like a tailored suit. But now, I realized, it wasn't a mask. He knew exactly what he was doing, and now he was waiting for me to do something back. I sat there for what felt like forever. Then, I spoke. So what happens if I say I've thought about it? Daniel's eyes flicked to mine, just for a second. But there it was, the first crack in that smooth exterior. The briefest hint of something underneath. I'd say that makes two of us, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. My heart was thudding now. Loud, reckless, like it wanted out of my chest. I had no idea where this was going. No script to follow. No playbook for this kind of situation. You ever done this before? I asked, barely above a whisper. He tilted his head, smiling slightly. Invite an employee over? Or blur a line I probably shouldn't? Either. He leaned back on the couch, resting his arm on the backrest behind me. No, never. He paused. But I've wanted to. I felt his eyes on me again. That same quiet heat that had been building since I walked through the door. I looked away, trying to breathe. This was insane. This was my boss. But the way he looked at me, the way he'd always looked at me, in quiet moments at work when no one else was paying attention, it all clicked into place. This is dangerous, I muttered. Daniel laughed softly. So is good wine. So is ambition. Doesn't stop us, does it? I turned back toward him, and this time I didn't hold back. I leaned in, slowly, testing the air between us. He didn't move, didn't rush, just met me halfway. And then we kissed. It was careful at first, intentional, like we were both making sure the other was really there, that this was really happening. But the second our lips met, something in me gave out. His hand slid to the back of my neck, warm and steady, guiding me closer. I felt the pressure of his mouth, the soft scrape of stubble, the taste of wine on his tongue. My chest pressed against his, and all the tension that had been building for months, hell, maybe longer, uncoiled at once. By the time we pulled apart, my hands were shaking. I opened my mouth to say something. Anything, but nothing came out. Daniel beat me to it. That's what I meant, he murmured, his voice low. That's what I've been thinking about. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Because, same. The rest of the night blurred a little. We didn't rush into anything more. There was something quiet about it, an unspoken agreement not to move too fast, not to ruin whatever this was, by going from 0 to 60. He poured us more wine. We talked, really talked, about how he saw me, about how long this had been building. He admitted he'd noticed me almost right away, but kept it to himself, unsure if he was imagining things. I told him I'd always tried to keep things strictly professional, that I figured he was untouchable. Out of my league, Daniel laughed at that. You're smarter than half the people in that office, he said, and probably the only one who actually scares me. I raised an eyebrow. Scares you? He nodded. You make me want things I shouldn't want. The way he said it made my skin prickle. Eventually, I ended up on the balcony with him. We stood side by side, looking out at the skyline. The city lights glowed against the night, soft and golden. He stood close, so close his arm brushed mine. Then he looked over at me and asked the one question I wasn't prepared for. "So what happens next?" I turned to face him. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but I'm not sorry it happened." He nodded slowly. "Neither am I." And then he kissed me again, this time longer. This time like we weren't coworkers anymore. The second kiss was different. The first had been cautious, careful, testing boundaries. This one wasn't. It was slower but deeper, more deliberate, like Daniel had decided something, like he wasn't asking anymore. My back brushed the glass railing of the balcony, and suddenly there was nowhere else to go. His hand rested at my hip, his thumb pressing through the fabric of my shirt, steady but gentle. The city buzzed below us, traffic, sirens, voices carried up from the streets, but it all felt muted, distant. The only thing that felt real was him. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathing heavier than we should have been for two people just standing still. "You good?" he asked softly, his voice more careful now. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "Yeah, just processing." He gave the faintest smile. "Me too." We went back inside, but the air in his apartment felt different now. Charged, like every inch of space between us was magnetic. I sat on the couch again, glass of wine in hand, mostly for something to do with my fingers. Daniel sank into the seat next to me, close enough that our knees brushed. "You're quiet," he said after a moment. I laughed nervously. "What do you want me to say? That this is insane? That I probably shouldn't be here?" "Do you regret it?" he asked, not flinching. That was the thing. I didn't. Not even a little. I shook my head. "No." His eyes softened, and he let out a breath that sounded like relief. "Good," he said simply. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't awkward. Just heavy, thick with everything we weren't saying. Finally, I set my glass down and leaned back, turning toward him. "So, what are we doing, Daniel?" He didn't answer right away. He just studied me, his gaze sharp but unreadable. Then, quietly, he said, "I don't know, but I know I want more." My chest tightened at that. "More? More of this," he said, reaching out and brushing his fingers along my wrist. "More of you," I swallowed hard. "And at work?" He smirked faintly, tilting his head. "At work, nothing changes. I'm still your boss. You're still the ambitious one trying to prove yourself. And outside of work?" His voice dropped lower. "Outside of work, you're mine." The words sent a shiver straight through me. I didn't know how to respond. So I didn't. I just leaned in and kissed him again, harder this time. And this time, he didn't hold back. His hand slid up to the back of my neck, the other resting on my thigh, fingers curling lightly against me. The kiss deepened, urgent now, and I couldn't think, couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything except give in. By the time we broke apart, my pulse was racing. His too. I could feel it in the way his chest rose against mine. "Stay," he said, his voice low, almost rough. "Don't go home tonight." I hesitated, not because I didn't want to, but because I knew what it meant. It meant this wasn't just curiosity. It wasn't just one impulsive kiss after too much wine. It meant crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But when I looked at him, the calm certainty in his eyes, the way his hand still lingered on my leg, I already knew my answer. "Okay," I whispered. And just like that, the night shifted again. The second I agreed to stay, something changed in him. Daniel didn't rush, didn't pounce. He wasn't that kind of man. But the air between us tightened, like the moment before a storm breaks. He studied me, almost as if he wanted to be sure I really meant it. Then he leaned in again, slow, deliberate, and kissed me. This time, I didn't hold back either. I shifted closer, closing the tiny space between us, my hand brushing against his chest. His shirt was still unbuttoned at the collar, and I could feel the warmth of his skin underneath, He made a low sound, something between a sigh and a groan, and pulled me in harder. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't sloppy. It was controlled, intentional, but still hungry enough that my head spun. When his hand moved from my thigh to the small of my back, guiding me closer until I was almost in his lap, I didn't resist. I let it happen. The kiss broke, and I rested my forehead against his, breathing hard. "This feels unreal," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel smiled faintly, his thumb brushing against my jaw. "It's very real," I laughed nervously. "You're my boss. And right now, you're not my employee," he countered, his tone firm but soft at the edges. "Right now, you're just the man I want." That sentence alone nearly undid me. I felt reckless. Brave, in a way I hadn't in years. I slid fully onto his lap, straddling him, testing his reaction. He didn't hesitate. His hands gripped my waist, steadying me like he'd been waiting for it all along. We kissed again, deeper now, my hands sliding up into his hair. The tension between us had been building for months, subtle glances at the office, quiet moments where I thought I was imagining it, and now it was exploding all at once. When his lips trailed down my neck, my breath caught, my grip on his shoulders tightened, and he murmured something against my skin that I couldn't even process. I pulled back just enough to look at him. His eyes were darker now, sharp and intent. "Daniel," I whispered. "Yeah?" I hesitated, words tumbling around in my throat. "I want this." The corner of his mouth lifted into the smallest, most dangerous smile I'd ever seen. "Then you're not leaving tonight," he said simply. I shivered, not from cold, but from the certainty in his voice. For the first time since I'd walked into his apartment, I realized this wasn't just curiosity. This wasn't just a one-time mistake. Daniel wanted me, and I wanted him just as much. He stood, lifting me with him in one motion so smooth it startled me. My legs instinctively tightened around his waist as he carried me toward the hallway. "Bedroom?" I managed, breathless. He smirked. "Unless you'd rather the couch." I couldn't even answer. I just kissed him again. And that was all the answer he needed. His bedroom was exactly what I expected. Minimal, clean, but warm. Not the kind of space where someone just collapsed after a long day. It felt curated, intentional, like every detail had a reason. But I didn't have much time to take it in. Daniel set me down at the edge of the bed, his hand still at my waist. For a moment, he just looked at me, his chest rising and falling, like he was weighing something. "You can still say no," he said softly. "We stop now, and this night's just dinner and wine. No regrets." The fact that he gave me that out, after everything, hit me harder than I expected. It made me want him more. "I don't want to stop," I admitted. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. That was all he needed. His lips were on mine again, deeper, hotter now, his weight pressing me back onto the mattress. My hand slid under his shirt, tracing the lines of muscle I'd only ever imagined before. He made a sound, low, guttural, that sent a rush of heat through me. Clothes became an afterthought. A shirt tugged over my head, his sleeves rolled higher until his arms were bare, skin against skin. It wasn't rushed, but it wasn't hesitant either. It felt like controlled urgency, like he'd been waiting months for this and didn't want to waste another second. The way he touched me, confident, steady, but never careless, was enough to unravel me. His hand traced down my chest, pausing just enough to make my stomach clench with anticipation. I arched toward him without meaning to, my breath stuttering against his ear. "Relax," he murmured, his tone both calming and commanding. "Let me take care of you." Something about the way he said it made me melt. I let go, gave in, let him guide the pace. Every kiss, every graze of his hand was deliberate, like he was making sure I felt everything, every second, every shift in pressure. And I did. I felt all of it. The night blurred into something slow, intense, and almost overwhelming. The tension that had been simmering under the surface of every workday, every casual glance across the office, was finally spilling over in waves. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was release. When it was finally over, I lay there beside him, chest still heaving, sweat cooling on my skin. Daniel reached over and pulled me close, my head against his shoulder. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, grounding. Finally, I broke it. "So, what does this mean?" Daniel's fingers traced idle patterns against my arm. "It means," he said slowly, "that tonight was the first time, not the last." I turned my head to look at him. "You're sure?" He smirked faintly. "I've never been more sure about anything." I didn't know where this was going, or how messy it might get, but as I drifted off against him, the city lights bleeding through the blinds, one thing was clear. Whatever this was, it had only just begun. The morning after hit me differently than I expected. I woke up disoriented, tangled in sheets that weren't mine, the faint hum of the city filtering in through half-drawn blinds. For a split second, I forgot where I was. Then I rolled over and saw him. Daniel, still asleep, one arm slung lazily across the pillow, chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. He looked younger like this, softer. The calm authority he carried at work had melted into something human, unguarded. And that's when it hit me. I'd just slept with my boss. The realization landed in my chest like a weight. 100 what-ifs flooded my mind. What if he regretted it? What if I regretted it? What if this ruined everything? But then he stirred, eyes fluttering open, and when he saw me watching him, he smiled. Slow, genuine, unhurried. "Morning," he said, his voice rough from sleep. My chest loosened. "Morning." He reached over, brushed his fingers through my hair, and for a moment it felt natural, like this was normal. Like we'd woken up together 100 times before. "You hungry?" he asked. I let out a shaky laugh. "Depends. You cooking again?" He smirked. "Don't get used to it, but yeah." I followed him into the kitchen, still in last night's clothes, while he moved around shirtless, putting on coffee and cracking eggs into a pan. It was domestic in a way that didn't fit the picture I had of him. The polished, controlled boss who never let anyone see past the surface. Here, he was different. "Do you regret it?" I asked finally, unable to hold it in. He paused, spatula in hand, then turned to look at me. "No," he said simply. I exhaled. "Good, because neither do I." Something eased between us at that. He plated the eggs, slid one toward me, and we ate in companionable silence. No small talk, no pretending. Just two men who'd crossed a line and weren't pretending they hadn't. But as I sipped my coffee, reality crept back in. Work, the office, the dozens of eyes that would notice even the smallest shift between us. "So, how do we do this?" I asked carefully. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "At work, nothing changes. You're my employee, I'm your boss. That's the line. But here," he gestured between us, "we don't have to pretend." I nodded slowly. "And if someone finds out?" He smirked, sipping his coffee. "Then we'll deal with it. But I don't plan on giving them a reason to look." The confidence in his voice steadied me. Still, as I left his apartment later that morning, slipping back into the city like nothing had happened, I couldn't shake the tension in my chest. At work, everything would look the same. But nothing was the same. And I wasn't sure if I was ready for what came next. Walking into the office that Monday felt like stepping into a minefield. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, keyboards clicked, coworkers murmured about projects. Everything looked the same. But for me, nothing was, because I couldn't stop replaying Friday night in my head. The wine, the balcony, his lips on mine. Waking up in his bed like it was the most natural thing in the world. And now, he was right there, Daniel. Standing at the front of the open office, sleeves rolled, tie loosened just enough to look effortless. The same as always. Except now, I knew what he looked like with that shirt off. When his eyes flicked to mine, it was less than a second, so fast no one else would have noticed, but I did. And it was enough to make my pulse spike. I tried to keep my head down, burying myself in emails and project briefs, but it felt impossible to focus. Every time he walked past my desk, I felt hyper aware of myself, the way I sat, the way I breathed. Like everyone could see through me, like they knew. And then came the meeting. The whole team gathered in the glass-walled conference room. Daniel at the head of the table, me a few seats down. He ran through the agenda with his usual calm authority, pointing at slides, asking questions. Business as usual. But every so often, his gaze would land on me. Just a fraction, longer than it should have. Not enough to be suspicious, but enough that I felt it. Like a live wire between us. At one point, he asked me to walk the team through a proposal I'd been working on. My voice wavered at first, nerves tangled with the memory of his hands on me, his words in my ear. But as I kept going, I steadied. I clicked through the slides, explained my thought process, answered questions. When I finally wrapped up, Daniel gave a small nod. Subtle, almost nothing, but to me it felt like approval, and maybe something more. The rest of the day passed in a blur. By 5 o'clock, most of the office was clearing out. I stayed behind, half to finish up and half because I was scared to leave, scared of what came after. That's when his voice came from behind me. "You've been quiet today." I turned and there he was, leaning against the doorway of my cubicle, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Trying not to make it obvious, I admitted, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "You're doing fine," my heart thudded. "So this is how it's going to be? Pretending nothing happened?" He glanced around to make sure no one was nearby, then stepped closer. His voice dropped, barely a whisper. "No, this is how it's going to be here." And then, before I could answer, he brushed his hand against mine. Just for a second, just enough to remind me. "I'll see you later," he said, straightening up, and walked away. I sat there frozen, pulse racing, pretending to type while my whole body buzzed. Later. The word replayed in my head all the way home. This wasn't just a one-time thing. It was the start of something we both knew we shouldn't want, and yet neither of us could stop. The word later echoed in my head for the rest of the day. By the time I got home, I couldn't concentrate on anything. Emails, dinner, even the show I put on for background noise. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message, half terrified of one. It finally buzzed just after 9. "Daniel, you free?" My heart skipped. I stared at the screen for all of 2 seconds before replying. "Me? Yeah. Daniel, come over." His apartment looked different this time. Or maybe I did. The lights were lower, softer, no wine glasses waiting on the counter, no pretense of dinner. Just him, standing barefoot in the living room, sleeves rolled again like he hadn't moved since Friday. The second I stepped inside, he closed the distance. No small talk, no hesitation. His hands on me, his lips on mine, pulling me in like he'd been holding back all day. And I didn't fight it. I couldn't. We stumbled toward the couch, kissing like we'd been starved for it, and in a way, we had. Every glance in the office, every stolen second had built to this. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless. He rested his forehead against mine, his voice low, rough. "I thought about you all weekend," he admitted. The honesty hit me like a punch. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. "Me too." He pulled back, just enough to look at me, really look at me. His hand slid to the side of my face, thumb brushing my jaw. "This isn't just a distraction for me," he said. "I need you to know that." The weight in his voice caught me off guard. I blinked. "It's not just that for me either." We sat there in silence for a moment, the kind that says everything words can't. Then he leaned in, softer this time, kissing me like he wanted to memorize it, like he was claiming it. And I knew, right then, that this wasn't going to be simple, it wasn't going to be easy, but it was real. And I wanted it. No matter the risks. The weeks that followed blurred into something I could only describe as dangerous happiness. Work was the same on the surface. Meetings, deadlines, late nights at the office. But underneath, everything was different. A glance across the room meant more now. A casual brush of hands passing a document carried heat, and every so often, when no one was watching, his lips would find mine again. Not the boss, not the creative director, just Daniel and me. Whatever this was, whatever it was becoming, it wasn't stopping. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't want to stop either.